Wonderhussy here on a balmy summer's evening in the oil fields outside Bakersfield. That's right, you might not realize there's oil country in California, but there's a ton of it. Outside Bakersfield, you can see these derricks pumping away merrily, sucking all that light, sweet crude from the bowels of the earth straight into your gas tank. Okay, actually, I don't know if that's light, sweet crude. I don't know very much about oil. I just know one thing, and that is that this part of the country is absolutely fascinating. I've been driving around all afternoon. I've already shot 2 really interesting videos out here, but I have just enough sunlight left to get one more in under the door before I have to call it quits on this beautiful 13th of June, 2024. And what a beautiful day it's been. Anyway, you might be wondering, what did I drive out to this lonely oil patch to check out now? Well, it's this. Now, on Google Maps, it was marked as an Indian cemetery. So I thought, oh, that'll be neat to go check out an Indian cemetery. But then I started reading the reviews, and it's actually way more interesting than that. Okay, as you can see, there are 5 lonely graves in this desolate cemetery in this godforsaken oil patch outside Bakersfield. It looks like the 2 back here don't even have names on them. This one is just 2 weathered old boards tied together with a rope, and then there's kind of like a stone on top of it. We'll probably never know who lies buried here, although it was probably someone who worked in these oil fields. These oil fields have been going for quite some time. So R.I.P. to this anonymous roughneck or roustabout, whoever he was. And then next to him, or her, I suppose, it could have been, oh God, I hate to think about the poor women that had to be out here. But next to that one, there's another unmarked grave. It's got a, well, I thought it was a horseshoe at first, but it's just a old metal ring of some sort. Again, a very simple cross made out of boards, and then a pile of bricks and a rock at the bottom. And oh, look, somebody left a Marine Corps medallion here. I mean, how would they have known if this dude was a Marine? Golly, and then there's a penny. Anyway, also another grave that we may never know who lies buried in. So 2 anonymous graves, and then up front, well, these graves we get a little bit more information on. Over here we got Tom Glenn, born in February of 1868, died the day after Christmas, 1940. Oh, I wonder if he ate too much candy for Christmas. Well, probably not in 1940. Well, I guess the U.S. wasn't involved in the war yet, so there was no rationing. So, I don't know, maybe he did eat too much candy. I have a feeling that's not the case, though, and we may just be finding that out shortly. Okay, well, next to him, there's a W. Glenn. This one's kind of hard to make out. I don't know if you can see it. W. Glenn, born in 1867, so 1 year older than Tom Glenn, probably his brother, older brother. He died in October of 1907. Oh, wow, so he was only 40 years old. He died young. I mean, this was a rough way of life out here, working in these oil fields. 1907, well, I just made a video earlier today at the Lakeview Gusher. It was the site of the biggest accidental oil spill, I guess. It was a gusher that went bonkers, and oh God, I can't remember now. I already forgot, but like hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil just went blasting off into the desert, and I don't actually know how many men died as a result of that, but that didn't happen until 1910, so he died just before that happened. But my point is, this was a rough and dangerous way of life, so you know, the odds are good. If he didn't die in something related to the oil field or the oil industry, well, then he probably died of something related to drinking, gambling, and fighting in the bars that served these oilmen. Anyway, next to Tom and Glenn, we have one more grave. And this one is marked very elusively as Chinaman. Died October 13th, 1907. Wow, they didn't even know his name. I mean, well, back then, and even still today, sadly, a lot of parts of the United States were pretty racist towards Chinese people, and there was a lot of Chinese workers here. I don't need to remind you, that came over to work on the railroad and in the mines, and well, apparently in the oil fields too. And what's interesting is this unnamed Chinaman, which I'm well aware is probably an offensive term to some people, but I'm just reading what it says on the grave, and I think it'll all be explained shortly. Anyway, this Chinaman died October 13th, 1907. Well, that's the same day that W. Glenn died. Now, what do you suppose could have happened to cause the deaths of two men on the same day? Could it have been an oil explosion, another gusher? Could it have been a bar brawl? Could it have been a car accident? Lucky for us, we don't have to stand here idly speculating, because the answer is written on this sign in front of the cemetery. And this is what I read on Google Maps that made me want to come out here. I think this is super weird, but super interesting. Okay, it says the final hours of William Glenn. And this right here is what I read on Google Maps. So I'm gonna go ahead and read that first. I don't know if you can see if there's a glare, but it says, I have worked in the oil industry my whole life. And since the mid-1980s, I've heard many different versions of how Billy Glenn and the Chinaman met their untimely end. Okay, I guess Billy Glenn is short for William Glenn, W. Glenn, the guy who's buried right there in the middle. It says, from the story of Billy cutting off the Chinaman's ponytail as a prank, and the Chinaman in turn had killed him with a knife, thus prompting Tom Glenn to later that day come and avenge Billy Glenn by killing the Chinaman, to both of them dying in a knife fight for an unknown reason. Unfortunately, there's no record to be found of what the Chinaman's real name is or what he actually died from. Did Tom Glenn actually kill him in revenge? Or did he die from a wound received from Billy Glenn? Back in that time period, it was known that the Chinese would supply opium to the oil field workers, and some believe that the Chinaman may have given Billy Glenn opium, and he might have simply lost his mind. Oh, the plot thickens. It says one thing for sure, there's still many unanswered questions about what actually led up to that fateful outcome on October 11th, 1907. Well, hold on a minute. The grave said October 13th. What is this? Who wrote this? Do some fact checking. I'm trying to run a serious news channel here, guys. You're making me look bad. Well, okay, maybe it was just a typo. Anyway, then the last paragraph says, with no disrespect intended towards anyone, I felt that it was important to tell the real story of the Chinaman's tale as it has become a part of local history. Who said there's no history in Bakersfield? We're not even in Bakersfield. We're 40 miles west of Bakersfield in the literal middle of nowhere. But like I always say, the most interesting stuff can be found in the middle of nowhere. Okay, well, typos or inaccuracies aside, whoever erected this thing, and he doesn't have his name up here anywhere, did do his due diligence, and he found 2 old newspaper articles that actually describe what happened between William Glenn and the Chinaman. I love this one. Awful work of an insane man. Failing to kill others, he then plunges the knife into his own abdomen. Dateline, Bakersfield, California, October 12th. October 12th? This is by the Associated Press. Why can't anyone get their dates right here? Was it the 11th, the 12th, or the 13th? Well, maybe it happened on the 12th and then he died a day later. Anyway, it says, William Glenn, well known in this vicinity and employed by the Vishnu Oil Company, San Luis Obispo County, became suddenly insane yesterday and naked chased the Chinese cook from one of the cottages. When the Chinaman escaped, Glenn buried the 8-inch blade of his knife in his own body. He then went to a bunkhouse where Fred Sperry and 2 companions were, and he tried to batter down the door. The occupants had been awakened by the screams of the maniac and the Chinaman and grabbed guns to protect themselves. The crazy man finally forced partial entrance into the house. Sperry broke the stock of his gun over Glenn's head and knocked the knife out of his hands. Both stooped for the knife, but Glenn got it, and, failing to reach Sperry, again plunged the weapon into his own abdomen and neck. But he wasn't done yet. He made still another effort to get into the house. Sperry again hit him over the head with the butt of his gun. The loss of blood was beginning to weaken the maniac. He walked off, and the men were able to control him. Word was sent for help, but the man's abdomen was literally hacked to pieces, and he died in a few hours. Wow! Okay, so basically it sounds like the cook, the Chinese cook, the Chinaman, maybe did sell Billy Glenn, some opium, and it made him go crazy, and he stripped naked and ran around terrorizing this oil camp. I don't know, that's terrible. And then there's another article this guy found from the Morning Echo. I guess that was a Bakersfield paper back in the day. Yeah, this one says Dateline October 11th, so I'm not sure what's going on with the dates. It's kind of hard to read this. The print is all messed up, so he went ahead and typed it out over here. But it's the same story. It just talks about how Billy Glenn, one of the employees of the lease, stark naked and apparently insane with a long butcher knife in his hand, was chasing the Chinese cook around the bunkhouse and making the air hideous with blood-curdling yells. After the Chinaman made his escape down the road, Glenn turned the knife on himself, burying the 8-inch blade into his body several times and partly disemboweling himself. Ugh. He then saw Sperry and the other boys in the bunkhouse, and he made a rush for the door, trying to batter it down, presenting a horrible sight to those inside. Sperry and his companions grabbed their guns, beginning to realize that they might have to battle for their lives. Glenn charged the door several times. "Kill me! For God's sake, kill me!" he yelled. Oh, it's so dramatic. Anyway, basically the same thing. He broke into the house. They had the fight. He hit the other guy, hit him over the head with a gun. He ended up bleeding to death. I mean, wow. This article does say that Sperry tried to wash the wounds out, but it was found impossible to do anything as the abdomen was literally hacked into pieces. And about 9 a.m. death came. So, okay, the altercation happened on the 11th and he died on the 12th. Well, I don't understand why the grave says the 13th. None of this really adds up. But it sure is a good story. Oh, it says here, this information was placed here by ampedparanormal.com. Anyone ever hear of ampedparanormal.com? I'm gonna have to look them up. Anyone who takes the time to come out and do a whole display like this in the freaking middle of nowhere gets my respect. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed reading about this and then driving out here on such a beautiful, peaceful night. I mean, I don't mean to make light of the situation with Billy Glenn and the Chinaman, and it is really sad that they don't even know the name of the Chinaman. You know, the fact that his grave just says Chinaman, that's pretty harsh. I don't know why he died the same day, though. I mean, if Billy Glenn went crazy, he stripped naked and went, he said he chased the Chinaman. The Chinaman ran away. Well, how did the Chinaman die on the same day? Oh, golly, I guess we don't have all the answers. Thanks a lot, Amped Paranormal. Forget what I said about respect. I want answers. No, really, I do. I respect this guy for putting this up. But yeah, unfortunately, this stuff just leaves me with more questions than answers. I mean, I doubt it. This is a real long shot. But if anybody watching this video happens to know the real story of what happened to this poor Chinaman, please let us know in the comments. I know it's a long shot, but hey, you never know. I've got a pretty diverse audience, and somebody watching this just might know. Or even if you don't know, if you have at least a good theory you'd like to share, put that in the comments too. I mean, I kind of liked the theory of the other guy cutting his ponytail off and then him stabbing him and that whole scenario, but I don't know, man. If he was selling him dope and then he went crazy, maybe somebody else from the camp killed him for peddling dope, you know, like turning all the oil field workers onto opium. I don't know. I've never tried opium. I'll be honest. I'm afraid to because I feel like I might really like it. And then I would never, ever get out of my opium den. Anyway, I've said enough. It's time for me to respectfully leave this little cemetery in the middle of this vast, lonely oil field with the beautiful sunset. The sun is just going down over the Pacific Ocean, over the mountains that way, about probably another 60 miles or so. And as much as I'd love to be at the beach myself right now, watching that sun melt into the Pacific, unfortunately for me, I'm heading east to Bakersfield because it's hot and I don't feel like camping. And I just went to a tar pit in the video I shot before this, so I really need to take a shower. Anyway, I'm gonna get on the road. Hope you enjoyed the fascinating but sad story of the mysterious Chinaman of the Bakersfield oil fields.